Welcome to Roots of the CLT, the first of 4 chapters examining the origins and evolution of the Community Land Trust. My name is John Davis. I've been commissioned by the National Community Land Trust Network to record a talk that I've delivered and revised a number of times since 2006. That year, the network's educational affiliate, the National CLT Academy, held its first 3-day training with funding from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Practitioners came together for a hearty meal of technical know-how, but we had added something unexpected to the menu. We began with an overview of the CLT's history and guiding principles. Practitioners may have been drawn to this training by the chance to feast on the meat and potatoes of organizing and operating a CLT, but first they had to eat their vegetables. They were served a generous helping of the leafy values underlying the model. This historical appetizer came to be known as Roots of the CLT. I've divided my talk into 4 segments to make it easier to digest. You are encouraged to consume these chapters in sequence, but there is no reason to do so at a single sitting. Roots of the CLT is focused on the model's development in a single country. CLTs currently exist in 46 different states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. It is important to note, however, that CLTs are now being established in other countries as well, including England, Australia, Canada, and Belgium. Our search for roots of the CLT will examine precedents and pioneers that prepared the ground for the first CLTs. We'll also trace the ways in which the model has changed over the years. There are now over 260 nonprofit corporations in the United States that either call themselves a community land trust or exhibit enough characteristics of the classic CLT that it is fair for us to call them a community land trust. Much of this growth has happened in the last 20 years. As you can see from the graph on your screen, the model itself has not been around very long. The first urban CLT was created in 1981 in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was started by an ecumenical association of pastors, priests, and nuns who were worried about gentrification and displacement in their inner-city neighborhood. The first rural CLT was created in southwest Georgia in 1969. New Communities Incorporated was conceived by stalwarts of the Southern Civil Rights Movement as a vehicle for helping African American farmers and their families to gain greater security in a turbulent time. But the model's roots are much older and rather tangled. The CLT did not grow out of a single tradition. It was seeded and nurtured by people from the single tax movement, the peace movement, the civil rights movement, and activists creating agricultural co-ops or planning more livable cities. The story of the model's origins is as messy and multifaceted as the picture on your screen. I'm going to tell a simpler tale. Understand this is my own biased, idiosyncratic selection of people, places, and connections. Someone else might spin this yarn a different way. I'm going to sort the defining characteristics of the CLT into 3 clusters, and then say how each of them came to be grafted onto the green and growing trunk of the CLT. There are characteristics related to the distinctive way in which a CLT handles the ownership of land and buildings. There is a distinctive way in which the CLT is structured organizationally. And what the organization does with its property is distinctive as well, who it serves and how it operates. Among the organizations called a CLT, there is enormous diversity in name, purpose, and structure. Yet all CLTs are rooted in a common history and share a number of features. I'm going to focus on these commonalities while acknowledging that many variations exist. Not all CLTs are the same. Let's start by seeing how CLTs deal with the possession and use of real property. A nonprofit corporation holds and manages scattered parcels of land on behalf of a place-based community with the intent of owning this land forever. Any buildings are sold off to homeowners, cooperatives, nonprofits, or other corporations or individuals. These structures may already exist when the CLT acquires the land, or they may be constructed years later. A ground lease knits these ownership interests together. This is not your typical landlord-tenant agreement. The CLT ground lease lasts for a very long time, often 99 years. It is mortgageable, inheritable, and protects and balances the interest of both parties. By the way, when we talk about structural improvements on a CLT's lands, we are not only referring to detached single-family houses like the one pictured here. Multi-unit condominiums, cooperatives, and rental housing have been developed on land that is leased from a CLT. So have mobile home parks, shelters, and housing for persons with special needs. And housing is not the only use for a CLT's lands. CLTs have sponsored community centers and service facilities, community gardens, and urban farms, offices, stores, and other commercial buildings. Anything you can build on land, anything you can do with land, has been done using this unusual model of tenure that combines community ownership of land with individual ownership of buildings. Dual ownership is a defining characteristic of what is often called the classic CLT, but a number of variations have appeared over the years. CLTs that do rental housing sometimes end up owning both the land and the building. CLTs doing condominiums sometimes own neither the land nor the building, making use of affordability covenants instead. Other variations arise when local CLTs tailor the model CLT ground lease to fit conditions and priorities in their own communities. Here's the next cluster of characteristics. There are three organizational features that allow us to call a leased land arrangement a community land trust. They put the C in CLT. The landowner has trust in its name, but it is not legally a real estate trust. It is a nonprofit corporation, no different than any other nonprofit established under a state's corporate statutes. The CLT has a voting membership that is drawn from a service area that can be as small as a single neighborhood or as large as an entire city or multi-county region. That membership is empowered to elect a board that maintains a balance of interest among different constituencies. In the classic CLT, seats on the governing board are divided equally among three interest groups: directors who represent people living on a CLT's land, both homeowners and renters, directors who represent residents living around but not on the CLT's land, and directors representing institutions like local churches, local government, businesses, banks, or various nonprofits in the neighborhood. A majority of CLTs have adopted this organizational form, but there are variations here as well. The most common in recent years have been CLTs that are not created from scratch as new nonprofits. Instead, they are grafted onto a pre-existing organization like a Community Development Corporation or a Habitat for Humanity affiliate. This has been done in a variety of ways, either by incubating the CLT under the corporate umbrella of an existing nonprofit and later spinning it off, or by amending the nonprofit's bylaws and converting it into a CLT, or by operating the CLT permanently as a corporate subsidiary or internal program. And as I've already mentioned, CLTs are frequently combined with other models of private non-market housing, especially those at the homeownership end of this continuum, a family of tenures that I named years ago shared equity homeownership. These hybrids represent organizational variations all their own. Finally, let's look at the distinctive way that CLTs are operated. There is an emphasis on serving people of limited means, while carrying out other activities recognized as charitable by the IRS under Section 501c3 of the tax code. There is an emphasis on maintaining the permanent affordability of housing and other structural improvements on a CLT's land. And there's an emphasis on keeping homes in good repair and making sure they're not lost to foreclosure. CLTs stand behind the housing they've created. They stand behind the people they have helped. Especially when creating home ownership opportunities for low-income people, CLTs are committed to making sure these opportunities last and are not eroded by the boom and bust of a volatile economy. They are made to last by an operational commitment to what CLTs have come to call the three faces of stewardship. This long-term commitment forces every CLT to look for an equitable balance between competing goods and goals. A CLT wants to preserve affordability for future generations while allowing the present generation to build wealth. A CLT wants to respect the privacy and independence of the people who live on its land, while retaining the right to intervene if homes are not kept in good repair, if aging systems are not replaced, if mortgage payments are not made, risking foreclosure. Different CLTs handle these trade-offs in different ways, introducing many variations in how they operate and who they serve. Despite their diversity, what all CLTs have in common is an operational commitment to staying in the picture long after a parcel of land is acquired, long after development is done. This durable commitment to the sustainability of the opportunities it has worked so hard to create is the CLT's forte. Stewardship is what a CLT does best. In the words of Connie Chavez, "We're the developer that doesn't go away." This intersecting cluster of characteristics has the effect of transforming a CLT's lands and what's developed on them from being market commodities that enrich a fortunate few to becoming shared resources that are held and managed by a nonprofit steward for the benefit of a larger community, present and future. This is a far cry, of course, from the way that land and housing are typically handled in the United States. Speculation, not stewardship, has ruled from the very beginning. Many of our nation's founding fathers built their fortunes by accumulating land in the path of development, anticipating where people would settle and how a town might grow. Some of them became revolutionaries, in part because they resented the Crown's interference in their get-rich land schemes west of the Allegheny Mountains. The roster of American land speculators is crowded with the names of such luminaries as Benjamin Franklin, Patrick Henry, and George Washington. Remember, the father of our country was a land surveyor and speculator long before he won fame as a soldier. So deeply ingrained and widely practiced is this notion of an individual's inalienable right to claim for himself all the land he can grab that Thorstein Veblen, our greatest homegrown political economist, suggested that speculation, not baseball, is really our national pastime. He dubbed land speculation the great American game. The CLT is part of a different tradition, where land is viewed as our common heritage, where gains in value are seen as social products of a community's investment and growth, where current use trumps future speculation. This is an ethic of stewardship that is overshadowed and often forgotten, but it is rooted as deeply in American culture as our national passion for accumulation and speculation. A story I'll tell in the next chapter. One final note before we delve more deeply into the CLT's history. This presentation is a non-commercial work in progress with images and ideas I have borrowed from many sources for the sole purpose of educating a community of colleagues. If you notice major omissions or mistakes, please point them out. I would welcome your suggestions for improvement. My address is posted on your screen.